A $12 flash drive saved my life. Tuesday, 3:07 p.m., Chicago. I left the office to grab it, 10 in, 10 out. When I pulled up, a black SUV I didn't recognize sat in front of my house. The front door wasn't locked. The living room, the sofa my wife and I picked out together, wasn't empty. I didn't shout. I took the flash drive from my home office, walked past the man scrambling for his shirt and the woman who promised me forever, and closed the door behind me. If I hadn't forgotten that drive, I'd still be married to a lie. You think the story starts there. It doesn't. The real turn is why I stayed silent, what my boss told me that night, and how that piece of plastic didn't save a presentation. It saved years of my life. In 60 seconds, I'll show you how a mistake at work exposed the truth at home, and why silence was my sharpest weapon. Name's Michael Carter. I'm a marketing analyst in Chicago, the kind of job where numbers talk and people hope they're telling the truth. I'm 41, steady, dependable, the guy who leaves the office by 6 and still checks the back door twice before bed. My life ran on rails. Coffee at 7, train at 8, dinner with my wife, a weekend game on TV. Not flashy, not broken, just solid. I took pride in that. I like knowing how the day ends when it starts. Maybe that sounds boring. To me, routine felt like respect. You show up, you keep your word, you protect what is yours. I believed that made a good man, maybe even a good husband one day. What I did not know yet was how fragile solid can be. One small choice, one ordinary Tuesday, would pull the pin on everything. The fuse was already burning. I just could not smell the smoke. Not yet. I met Jessica Miller in a coffee shop off Wabash a month after she left a toxic relationship. She sat near the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup like it was heat and shelter. She smiled, but her eyes kept scanning the room, the way people do after they have learned pain has a schedule. We talked about design because that was her world, and baseball because that was safe ground. She was funny, quick, and guarded. When I asked about her last year, she said, "I am still sweeping glass," and changed the subject. I understood enough to stop pressing. You learn after 30 that care is mostly patience, so I kept it light. I asked about her clients, her favorite fonts, the best deep dish. She laughed once, surprised, then looked away like laughter was expensive. When we stood to leave, I held the door. She thanked me without meeting my eyes. A wall had a name. 2 weeks later, she told me about him. Not his name, just the outline. He separated her from her friends, then from her opinions, then from the mirror. Control never arrives in a mask. It arrives as kindness with a price tag. He chose restaurants, clothes, passwords, then stories. He decided which feelings were allowed. When she pushed back, he called it drama. When she got quiet, he called it proof. It lasted years. By the end, her confidence was a thrift store jacket she could not wear outside. She said it softly, without tears, like someone reading inventory after a fire. I listened and stayed still. Men my age know that fixing is different from helping, and helping is mostly listening. I told her she did not have to explain more. She nodded, grateful and exhausted. The check arrived. She reached for it and winced at her own reflex, then laughed at that. Small freedoms began to return, slowly. After she left, Jessica moved back in with her parents in a quiet suburb west of the city. Their house smelled like lemon cleaner and second chances. She set up a desk in the spare bedroom, hauled out her old iMac, and started taking small design jobs no one else wanted. Menus for mom and pop diners, logos for lawn services, birthday invitations. Nothing glamorous, but each one put a brick back where something had been stolen. On Saturdays, she helped her dad fix the fence and listened to him hum Motown while he worked. Her mother made tea and told her that healing is noisy before it is calm. I stopped by when I could, always announced, always brief. We took walks around the block. She talked about typefaces and deadlines, not feelings. I talked about traffic and baseball, not feelings. The distance felt respectful. The respect felt safe. Safety, finally, started to feel like home, for us both. I learned her schedule without prying. Tuesdays and Thursdays she worked from a corner booth at a neighborhood cafe because the light was good. I would swing by for a late coffee, nod hello, and ask about her projects. She answered politely, never personally. Her shoulders stayed tight, like a door on two locks. When a client email buzzed her phone, she flinched first, then smiled. I recognized the muscle memory of bracing. I had my own version from long hours and sudden pivots at work. We connected over deadlines and the small pride of finishing something decent. I never asked for her number. I offered mine and let it sit on the table like a business card. She did not take it. I told myself trust is not a switch, it is a dimmer. As I left, she said, almost to herself, that quiet days felt loud lately. I heard the ache inside the sentence. I kept showing up. Patience turned into a plan. I chose consistency over charm. I showed up at the same time each week, ordered the same black coffee, and left before she needed an exit. I talked about small things: a broken train car, a neighbor's dog, the Cubs bullpen, the way February punishes Chicago. She relaxed in inches, not miles. When she complained about a difficult client, I did not offer fixes. I said, "That sounds exhausting," and meant it. I think she heard the difference. One snowy afternoon, the barista wiped down our table and said we looked like regulars. Jessica smiled at that. Regular felt like a word she could trust. Before I left, I slid a napkin across with a simple note. "If you ever need someone to listen, call me. No pressure, no clock." She folded it once, then again, like something worth saving. I walked out into the cold and felt the air change. Inside, something thawed, slowly. Days passed. Then a text buzzed my phone at 6:12 a.m. "This is Jessica. Coffee later?" I smiled like a teenager and answered yes before the train left the station. At the cafe, she brought a sketchbook and a guarded apology for the early hour. We talked work first. Then she flipped the page and showed me a logo she hated. I asked questions until the story behind it tumbled out. A client who second-guessed every choice and sent late-night edits with a fake smiley face. I said, "You deserve better than approval that hurts." She stared at me like I had named something she did not have words for yet. When the check came, she reached for it, paused, and slid it toward me with a grin. "Your turn," she said. Outside, the wind cut sharp. She handed me a small card with her number. "Use it wisely," she added. The wall cracked. More light got in. We met mornings after that, before the city's rush turned impatient. She talked about childhood Saturdays at the library, tracing letters with her finger, dreaming of designing book covers. She talked about the apartment she almost signed with the wrong man, the way silence lasted all weekend, the relief of her mother's extra key. I told her about my dad's toolbox and the rule he taught me: leave a thing better than you found it. We compared scars without making a contest of it. When she finally said, "I am afraid I will pick wrong again," I told her, "Fear is a smoke alarm, not a prison guard." She took a breath like someone surfacing. The barista refilled our cups and pretended not to see the moment. We sat there, warm in the window light, not fixing, not promising, just telling the truth. The truth for once did not argue back. Something steadier was happening. We both finally felt it. Trust did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived with small, boring proofs. I showed up when I said I would. I left when she needed space. I asked before I touched her hand. She said yes, then kept it there longer than a heartbeat. We cooked once at her parents' house, laughing when the smoke alarm scolded the garlic. Her dad told me to check the back fence anytime I came over. That was his way of approval. Her mom sent me home with leftovers and a smile that said the worst might be behind us. One night, walking past a church with the bells just settling, Jessica stopped, turned, and said, "If we do this, we do it slowly." I said, "Slow is good." She breathed out like a long winter ending. Then she added, "But we do it." That was the moment. A door opened. We stepped through together, careful, hopeful, both hands on the knob. At last. That little card with Jessica's number changed our rhythm. I didn't rush it. I saved the contact, stared at the blank message field, and did what men my age secretly do. I drafted 3 versions, deleted 2, and chose simple. Coffee tomorrow? Same spot. No pressure. Then I set the phone down like it might bite. An hour later it buzzed. "Tomorrow works. 8:10. I'm bringing sketches." 8:10 felt like a promise. I slept light, the way you do before a road trip or a first day on the job. Morning came early and honest. I ironed a shirt I didn't need to iron, checked for lint, checked again. On the train, my reflection looked like someone trying not to hope too loudly. At the cafe door, I paused. Inside, she was already there, cup in hand, shoulders soft, eyes less guarded. She held up the sketchbook like a truce. "You first," she said. I stepped in. The distance stepped back. Texting taught us each other's weather. She was sunrise, short, clear notes, lists of tasks, a half joke about caffeine replacing courage. I was late evening, longer replies, small stories from the train platform, a picture of Lake Michigan when the water looked like brushed steel. We set small rules without saying them. No midnight confessions, no puzzles to solve by phone. When a client treated her like a vending machine for ideas, she sent me a screenshot. I wrote, "You are not a button to push," and left it there. She replied with a photo of a Post-it on her monitor. Not a button. Older folks will understand this. After a certain age, kindness has to be specific. So I kept my messages steady, never fishing, never poking old bruises. One night I typed "Goodnight, Jess," and almost deleted the nickname. She answered, "Goodnight, Mike." It landed like a hand on the small of my back, guiding me forward. Our first official date was not a rooftop with violins. It was a small Italian place near her parents' neighborhood, the kind where the waiter calls everyone friend, and the bread arrives warm. We ordered shared plates because decisions felt heavy that week. She told me she still carried a spare house key in her purse. I told her I kept a tiny flashlight on my keychain because basements lie. We laughed at ourselves, adults with emergency kits for the heart. When the check came, I reached for it, ready to insist, ready to be scolded. She placed her hand over mine and said, "Let me treat you to dessert instead." The waiter brought cannoli, and we ate like we'd earned it. Walking to the car, she took my arm, not fingers laced, not yet, but firm enough to steady both of us on the cracked sidewalk. Under the streetlight, she said, "This was good. Not perfect. Good. It was everything." Good made space for truth. Over coffee the next week, Jessica named more of the damage. Not the movie scenes. No shouting, no broken plates. Just the slow scrape of distrust. He'd read her emails for safety. He'd correct her stories at parties. He'd call her too sensitive when she flinched at small cruelties. If you've lived long enough, you know this. Bruises can be invisible and still tender. I asked if she wanted to stop. She shook her head and kept going, as if naming it returned pieces to her. She said the worst part wasn't the control, it was the apology cycle, the flowers that bought silence. "I'm done being bought," she said, surprising herself. I didn't offer speeches. I topped off her coffee, sat with the wait, and gave her the one thing we forget is powerful: unhurried time. When we stood to leave, she hugged me first. Not long, not performative. Long enough to say, "I'm still here." Words can promise. Patterns convince. So I showed her my patterns. I arrived when I said I would, asked before assuming, and kept future talk light. I fixed her wobbly desk chair without making a production out of it. I sent her an Amazon link for a surge protector after a storm, not to impress her, but because power flickers on older blocks. She saw the kind of boring care that builds a life: air in tires, food in the freezer, an umbrella always by the door. When she missed a deadline and felt ashamed, I didn't tell her how to schedule. I said, "You are allowed to be human and still be excellent." She breathed different after that. One evening she texted, "I'm at the grocery store. Want anything?" Married people know that is a sacred sentence. I asked for milk. She brought milk and my favorite cereal. Small, yes. But that night, breakfast tasted like trust. 4 months will tell you who someone is when they're tired, busy, annoyed, or scared. We saw each other in all 4. When a client ghosted her after promising a big check, she sat in my car and stared at the dashboard. I said nothing, handed over a tissue, and waited. When my report got sliced in a meeting, she sent a text that simply read, "They're wrong." It helped. We kept romance gentle and expectations clear. She set the pace, and I matched it. When she asked for a week with no dates, I gave it to her and didn't keep score. At the end of that week, she knocked on my door with 2 coffees and said, "I don't want to do this halfway." She took my hand and didn't let go. That was the moment. Not a fireworks kiss, a decision, spoken plainly. We were official. The word wasn't heavy. It fit like a well-worn jacket. Being official felt like a sudden raise you earned after steady work. My mood evened out, sleep got deeper, food tasted brighter. I caught myself humming while shaving, which I hadn't done since my 20s. On Sunday, we took a long drive with no destination, just oldies on the radio and the comfort of not filling every silence. She reached over, turned my baseball cap backward, and said I looked ridiculous. I kept it that way because she was laughing, and I wanted more of that sound in my car. If you've been through enough, you know joy is not loud. It's specific. It's her stealing my fries, me pretending not to notice. It's the way she saved the last cherry for me without asking. At a red light, she traced a circle on my wrist with her thumb and said, "This feels like winning something I didn't know I entered." I said, "Same." Green light. We drove on. With the ground steady, we began to dream out loud. She talked about a studio with big windows and plants she would absolutely forget to water. I talked about leading a team at work without losing my evenings. We sketched a life that respected Mondays and protected Sundays. She wanted a dog that shed. I wanted a budget that didn't. We laughed and made lists anyway. She showed me a folder of book cover ideas she'd kept hidden, afraid to love them. I picked one and said, "Pitch this." She did, and a small publisher said yes. We celebrated with takeout on her parents' back porch, cicadas buzzing like applause. She looked at me and said, "I didn't think I'd ever want a future with someone again." I said, "We'll build one slow, with room to breathe." She nodded, tucked her hair behind her ear, and leaned on my shoulder. The night felt wide. Possibility does that. Meeting families is where fantasy meets history. My parents live in a modest ranch with a neat lawn and a fridge full of leftovers. My mom asked Jessica about her work and actually listened. My dad took me aside later and said, "She holds herself like someone who's had to." It was his way of saying, "Be gentle." At her parents' house, her mother pressed a container of lemon bars into my hands before I'd taken off my coat. Her father asked me to help move a grill, a test most men my age recognize. We moved it without scratching the deck. He nodded approval like a judge with a generous pen. Over dinner, conversation stayed simple. Weather, commutes, the best route to avoid tolls. The ordinary felt holy. As we left, her mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for giving her quiet." In the car, Jessica squeezed my hand and didn't let go until the light changed. Decision doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a Saturday morning at the kitchen table, 2 mugs, a grocery list, and a shared calendar. We were talking about fall travel when the subject drifted, not forced, to marriage. Neither of us made a speech. We spoke like people who have learned the cost of pretending. "If we do this," she said, "we protect what's gentle." I said, "We write our rules." We agreed on the kind of life we wanted. Dinners at home, friends who knock, a budget that tells the truth, a porch light that's always on. She slid her thumb over my ring finger like a rehearsal. It didn't scare either of us. Later, we walked by the lake and watched a little boy chase a kite that refused to fly. His dad jogged beside him, laughing, telling him to keep running. Jessica looked up at me and said, "Let's keep running." I said, "Together." The word landed. We married the quiet way. 20 people in a small chapel, a rented suit, her mother's lemon bars on folding tables. No fireworks, no drone footage, just steady hands and vows we wrote on index cards. My dad straightened my tie and whispered, "Be kind on the boring days." Her mom tucked a blue ribbon into Jessica's bouquet and said, "This time, you keep the key." We posed for photos by the church steps while a September breeze played with her veil. The ring felt heavier than its weight, but not scary. During the first dance, we swayed more than we danced. Nobody judged. The DJ mispronounced our last name and then got it right. Everyone clapped like that mattered. When we drove off, we didn't spray champagne. We stopped for fries and ate them in the parking lot, laughing at the grease. It wasn't glamorous. It was ours. I believed ours was the safest word I'd ever say. We found a starter home in a tree-lined suburb west of Chicago. Modest yard, honest mortgage, a porch light that made the street look friendlier. The previous owners left a box of extra cabinet handles and a note about a stubborn basement window. We painted the living room warm white, argued gently about rug sizes, and learned where the floors creaked at night. I installed a new deadbolt and a motion light over the garage. She labeled the pantry like a set designer. We planted 2 small maples by the sidewalk and promised to wait them into shade. The first time it snowed, I shoveled a path to her car before she woke up. She made cocoa and laughed at the hat I refused to replace. The house didn't change our lives. It gave our lives a container. "Feels like a beginning," she said, standing in the doorway with a box in her arms. I said, "Let's fill it well." Our days found a rhythm that older folks will recognize. Breakfast bowls and weather reports. Work bags by the door. A text at noon about grabbing milk. Evenings were simple on purpose. We cooked together, badly at first, then better. Garlic too hot for the pan, the smoke alarm acting like a coach with a whistle. We kept a movie list on the fridge. We paused often, not to scroll, but to talk. On Saturdays, we split chores the way sensible people do. I handled gutters and trash day. She handled laundry settings I never remembered. We argued about the thermostat like 2 people raised by different utility bills, then met in the middle. The couch became our island, not a trap. I know now what a good evening looks like. Shared silence that isn't empty. We ended most nights with the porch light on and the door locked. Safe, routine, ordinary. 3 words that felt like wealth. I wanted to keep them. I guarded our time the way I guard my passwords. At work, I pushed hard until 5 and then walked away. No hero stories, no last-minute emails that stole our dinner. I left the office by 6 and made the train that brought me home at 6:28. Jessica noticed. She'd look up from a cutting board and say, "You made it," like that was the point. On Sundays, I planned my week so I wouldn't spend Wednesday apologizing for missing Thursday. My boss respected results, not FaceTime, and I kept delivering them. That balance felt like a small rebellion in a city that worships busy. At home, I checked the back door twice, topped off windshield fluid, and kept the smoke detectors honest. Protection looked like little things done on repeat. I believed I'd cracked a code older men talk about, how to be useful without being absent. I thought if I kept doing that, everything else would hold. Holding became habit. We gathered small proofs, inside jokes that needed no setup, a shared grocery app that kept us from buying double eggs, a stack of library receipts tucked in a drawer like paper souvenirs. We made a rule for arguments, no raised voices, no walking out, and pause if either of us said, "time." It worked more often than not. We took Sunday drives with no destination, turned down talk radio when it got angry, and counted how many houses had porch swings. Our friends said we looked steady. Steady sounded right to me. Forever didn't feel like a movie word anymore. It felt like the next thing on the calendar. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop because, for once, there wasn't a shoe in sight. We said goodnight without needing to fix every small thing. The quiet between us held. I told myself this is how you build a life, one unremarkable day at a time. We started talking timelines the way grown-ups do, calmly, without pressure. Kids, maybe, in a couple of years. Not because a clock barked at us, but because we wanted to arrive ready. We opened a savings folder called Someday and tossed in what we could. She bookmarked cribs and paint swatches with names like Soft Breeze, laughing at how every color thinks it is a poem. I promised to finish the guest room first so no future crib would share space with my old boxes. We agreed to keep the spare key with her parents just in case, and to protect date night the way you protect your back. She scheduled a checkup. I booked a dentist appointment I'd put off. None of it felt heavy. It felt like tightening the screws on a good chair. One evening, she stood in the doorway of the would-be nursery and just breathed. "Not yet," she said, smiling, "but close." I said, "Close is good." Jessica's work picked up. Referrals, repeat clients, checks that cleared without drama. Confidence put weight back on her voice. She joined a new gym with a friend because sitting all day had her neck in a knot. She joked that she was there for the stretching more than the sweat. I teased her about bringing home smoothie recipes we'd hate. Our dinners grew simpler but better. Sheet pan meals, salads with real crunch, fewer takeout boxes in the recycling bin. She thanked me often for the little things. A car wash gift card, fixing the squeaky hinge, setting the coffee maker the night before. Gratitude lived in our house like another light left on. One night, she mentioned a trainer named Ty who showed her how to protect her shoulder. I nodded, half listening, fully trusting. She said the gym made her feel strong again, and that mattered more than the scale. I kissed her forehead and said, "Keep going." I believed I had chosen well, because peace doesn't lie easily. The faces in our wedding photos looked like people who knew what they were signing up for. On our anniversary, I wrote her a letter instead of buying a card. I told her I trusted the way she told the truth even when it cost her. I wrote that our home felt like a promise kept. She cried, the soft kind, and tucked the letter in her nightstand. I slept like a man with good locks and better company. The porch light did its small duty. The motion sensor blinked when raccoons argued by the cans. I felt protective and calm, two gears I'd always wanted to run at the same time. If you'd asked me then what could break us, I would have named illness, job loss, maybe a storm that took the roof. I would not have said a Tuesday. I did not yet understand how random can be cruel. 3 years passed like seasons that knew their cues. Summers brought baseball on the radio and road salt finally washed from the car. Fall gave us soup Sundays and the quiet pride of raked leaves. Winters were cold, but we had blankets, shows to catch up on, and a space heater with a mind of its own. Spring meant the maples in front finally threw real shade. We marked time with small traditions, lemon bars on our anniversary, new sneakers every June, a picture on the porch every first snow. We learned each other's shutdown routines and respected them. Family came by, friends borrowed tools, neighbors waved. If a camera had filmed our life, it would have looked ordinary in the best sense. My heartbeat matched the house, the couch, the kettle, the calendar, all reliable. I didn't know to be suspicious of calm. I didn't know calm can be the silence before glass breaks. Then came the meeting I had to nail. That Tuesday afternoon arrived looking like any workday with a little extra weight. I had a client presentation at 3, the kind that puts your name on the short list if you land it. Charts polished, talking points clear, tie knotted right. Around 1, I checked my laptop bag and felt the cold drop of panic. No flash drive. I pictured it at home, plugged into the desktop in my office. 10 in, 10 out, I told myself. Enough time. I grabbed my keys, told my team I'd be back before 2:30, and took the familiar route west. The sky was clean, the traffic polite. I rehearsed my opener at a red light and laughed at myself for doing it out loud. Turning onto our street, I noticed what didn't belong. A black SUV parked in front of our house. Not a neighbor's, not family. My stomach tightened, then I argued with my gut. I pulled to the curb and killed the engine. I sat at the curb with the engine ticking and my tie too tight, reminding myself the presentation was still the point. Land this client, keep my team fed, get home for dinner. Simple math. The black SUV in front of our house didn't fit the equation, but I forced a reasonable answer. Contractor, delivery, a friend from the gym. I checked the clock. 1:22. 10 in, 10 out, 20 minutes back. I pictured the opening slide, the one that made people lean forward. I practiced the line under my breath and tried to laugh at myself for being superstitious about a plastic stick. The neighborhood looked normal. A kid's scooter on a lawn, a flag moving slow, the faint thump of someone's dryer. Normal is a careful liar when it wants to be. I killed the engine and pocketed my keys. Quick, I told myself, like a command you give a dog. I stepped out, straightened my jacket, and headed for the door. The block wore that quiet, suburban afternoon look older folks know. Mail already taken in, sprinklers sighing, a wind chime making more effort than the breeze. Our porch had the same welcome mat we'd picked out at a hardware store while arguing about doorknobs. The motion sensor blinked as if to say, "You're home early." I resisted the urge to text Jessica a heads up. No reason to stir the pot for a 30-second detour. The SUV's windows were tinted dark enough to keep its story to itself. I noticed a gym bag on the passenger seat. Black, zippered, nothing special, and told myself plenty of people own gym bags. My key slid into the lock with a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. Even that felt louder. I breathed once, twice, like before a difficult call, and told myself to grab the drive and go. The handle turned easy. The door opened on the same hallway runner, the same framed photo from our honeymoon. familiar, until it wasn't. Home has a smell you stop noticing when you live there. Lemon cleaner, coffee from the morning, her vanilla lotion. Today something sharper wrote underneath. Cologne I didn't wear, sweat that didn't belong to me. The TV was off. Music wasn't playing. But I heard voices, low and close, the kind of tone people use when they think the world is far away. I didn't say, "Hey Jess." I don't know why. Habit would have me announce myself, but a quiet part of my brain said, "Wait." I set my shoes down softly on the rug and moved past the hallway table where we kept loose mail and spare keys. A laugh, hers, fluttered and died. I stood in the doorway between the hall and the living room and felt my body split. The part that wanted to back out, close the door, pretend I'd never returned, and the part that already knew I'd stepped into something I couldn't unsee. I rounded the corner. Clothes tell stories before mouths do. A man's t-shirt on the ottoman, a belt like a thrown question mark. Her sports bra, inside out, on the arm of the sofa we'd chosen the day we argued about fabric samples. Jessica's hair was loose, a curtain I knew too well, falling over her face as she kissed someone who was not me. His hand, tan and certain, on her hip. Their knees tangled like they'd practiced. For a second I thought I was in a room next to my life, looking through glass. My breath forgot how to work. The air got thick and old. The clock on the wall ticked the way it always had, rude and steady. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, my fingers still shaped around the ghost of my car keys. They didn't see me yet. I had time, half a heartbeat, to pick the world I wanted, denial or truth. Truth turned its face toward me. Jessica saw me first. She jerked back like a hand on a hot pan, mouth open around a name that didn't come out. The man twisted, grabbed for his shirt, found nothing but air, then found the shirt and got tangled in it. They looked small suddenly, two people caught under a blunt light. "Michael, wait, please," she started, words collapsing over each other. I didn't answer. Some part of me believed language could make it worse, could paint this into the walls. He muttered, "I should go," like a man who'd just remembered he left his lights on. I still didn't move. My heart was a hammer without rhythm. If you've ever had the wind knocked out of you, you know the useless panic. Body says breathe, lungs say no. I stepped to the side, past the coffee table we swore we'd stop bumping our shins on, and my eyes found the hallway to my office. The flash drive, the only job left. People think rage is loud. Sometimes it's a quiet room with a fire alarm you can't hear. My chest felt tight, but not dramatic, just wrong. I remembered my dad's rule for emergencies. Do the next sensible thing. Don't argue with the fire. Find the door. That thought was an anchor in deep water. Jessica was talking behind me. "It isn't what it looks like," the oldest sentence in the language, and I kept walking. Framed photos on the hallway wall became a cruel slideshow. Our first Christmas, lemon bars on our wedding day, the porch light after the first snow. I wanted to punch something until my knuckles understood, but I also wanted to never buy another bandage. I reached the office. The computer screen slept, the little light pulsing like a heartbeat. The flash drive was exactly where I'd left it, a dumb piece of plastic with a job to do. I reached for it with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. The drive slid out with a soft click that sounded too gentle for the moment. I stared at it in my palm and thought, this is the proof that I came home for. That was the absurdity. How small a thing could hold such weight. Jessica's footsteps stopped at the doorway. She didn't cross the threshold. We both knew that line had already been crossed somewhere else. "Michael, please," she said, voice breaking on the second word in a way that used to pull me in. This was a mistake. The word mistake floated there like a lifeboat with a hole in it. I put the drive in my pocket and pushed the drawer shut because leaving things open felt like another kind of violation. The room smelled like last night's coffee and today's ruin. He shuffled somewhere behind her, making himself small like a man trying to step out of a photograph. I turned, not fast, not slow, just enough to go. She reached for my sleeve and stopped short, as if my jacket had grown teeth. "It was the first time," she said, rushing, stacking promises like sandbags. "I love you. I don't want to lose us. I don't know why." The man cleared his throat and turned invisible again. I thought of every apology I'd ever heard at work for missed deadlines and cut corners. how some words are invoices you never intend to pay. My mouth stayed closed. Not because I had nothing to say, but because anything I said would feed a fire I didn't start. Older men will understand. Silence can be a tool sharper than anger. It refuses the role you're being assigned. It refuses theater. Jessica's eyes searched my face for a script I didn't carry. "Say something," she begged. I held the doorknob to my office like a rail on a moving train and let the seconds do their slow math. Then I let go. We moved like people in a narrow hallway, careful, clipped, not wanting to brush skin. The stranger, tall, gym lean, a life I didn't care to know, murmured, "I should give you 2 space," already edging toward the front. He avoided my eyes the way men do when consequences arrive on time. I stepped aside because I didn't want his shoulder to touch mine. He grabbed his shoes without untying them, a detail my brain logged against my will, and squeezed past the framed photo of our porch light like it might judge him. The door opened to afternoon and closed on nothing I recognized. Jessica stood in the living room, arms crossed tight over a body I knew too well, guilt darting through her face like birds hitting a window. "We can fix this," she said, almost whispering. Fix is the word people use when they mean forget. I walked to the entryway and picked up my keys from the bowl by habit. The house seemed smaller as I left, the way rooms shrink after a storm. The front door clicked behind me with the same old sound, and the world had the nerve to keep behaving. Sun on the driveway. A neighbor 2 houses down, bent over a rose bush. The SUV sat there, performing innocence. I unlocked my car and sat with both hands on the wheel until they learned how to be hands again. My phone lit up with reminders about the 3 p.m. meeting, unaware that my life had slipped its track at 1:34. I could taste metal. I could hear my pulse in my teeth. I started the engine. Somewhere inside, a voice I trusted said, "Do the next sensible thing." I reversed slow, checked my mirrors like a man taking a driving test, and pulled away from the curb. No horn, no screech, no speech. I drove back toward the city with a flash drive in my pocket and no words in my mouth. Back at the office, everything looked correct and wrong at the same time. My chair, my mug, my notes, each in its place like actors hitting marks while the script changed backstage. I opened my laptop and the cursor blinked like a metronome for a song I couldn't hear. I tried to breathe slow, the way you do after climbing stairs you didn't plan to climb. Email windows stacked. Calendar reminders popped like bubble wrap. I kept moving, not because I knew what to do, but because motion felt like safety. I checked the deck for typos already fixed. I clicked through charts like a man counting beads. A teammate leaned over the cube wall and asked if I was good. I said, "Fine," with a voice I didn't recognize. He studied me, then backed away, the way people do when a dog isn't wagging. My phone buzzed. 3 p.m. Client confirmed. You're up first. The room held still. The clock didn't. The conference room was too cold, the way they always are when someone wants you alert. I plugged in the flash drive like it hadn't just been pulled from a burning house. Slides appeared, calm and square, as if fairness lived in PowerPoint. The clients arrived with firm handshakes, a practiced smile for the receptionist, and a small pile of questions already loaded. I heard my voice from somewhere slightly behind me, steady enough to pass. Charts, projections, next steps. Muscle memory carried sentences across the table and set them down gently. When a client challenged an assumption, my mouth answered before my brain had time to panic. People nodded. Richard, at the end of the table, watched me like a man ready to catch a falling ladder. We closed on action items and polite optimism. Hands shook again. Someone said, "Great job." I put the clicker down. I had survived a normal meeting. It felt like walking away from an accident. Afterwards, I stood in the hallway pretending to scroll. My hands buzzed like they'd held an electric fence. 2 colleagues asked if I wanted to grab a late lunch. I told them I had emails. Lies come easy when the truth won't fit in the room. Back at my desk, I answered messages that didn't need answers and filed documents that didn't need filing. The building hummed, the way office buildings do, HVAC in the vents, printers spitting out agendas, a laugh too loud from someone who lives for Fridays. At 5:40, I was still there, polishing nothing. People waved goodnight. I waved back like a porch statue. The sun slid behind glass towers. My screensaver came on and went off and came on again. Richard's shadow stopped at my cube opening. He didn't ask if I was free. He said softly but like a command, "Grab your jacket. Now." I stood, more relief than fear. He was already walking. We took the elevator in silence. In the lobby, he held the door like we were leaving a funeral. The evening air felt too clean for the day I was carrying. He pointed his car toward a bar 10 minutes away, a place with a neon sign that's been broken the same way for 20 years. Inside, wood paneling held the smell of 1,000 conversations. No TVs screaming highlights, no trivia night, just the steady clink of glass and a jukebox that respected the room. We found a back booth where the light was kind and the table scarred with initials from braver decades. The bartender brought water without being asked, then waited for our nod. Richard ordered 2 beers, then looked at me the way fathers do when sons aren't boys anymore. "You don't have to talk," he said, "but you can." I opened my mouth to say I was fine. Nothing came out. The first tear did. I don't cry often. Men my age are taught to fold emotion into neat squares and tuck it in a drawer. But there in that booth, I unfolded everything. Not loud, just unstoppable. Richard didn't flinch. He squared the napkin holder with the salt shaker, the way neat people comfort chaos. I told him about the SUV, the hallway, the smell, the clothes, the way time bent in the living room. I told him about the flash drive, how stupidly important it felt, and how my body remembered my father's rule, do the next sensible thing. Words stumbled out, tripped, kept going. When I said on our sofa, my voice cracked open. He nodded like a metronome, steady, offering no fixes, no judgments, just the kind of attention that makes a person feel less temporary. The bartender placed the beers and walked away like a man who'd seen worse. When I finished, silence sat with us and didn't try to rearrange the truth. Richard let the quiet do some work before he spoke. "You didn't yell," he said, not a question. "No," I answered. "Good," he said. Words said in that room would live in that house forever. He asked 3 questions. "Are you safe? Are you sober? Do you have a plan for tonight?" I realized I had answered the first 2 by accident and ignored the third on purpose. He leaned in. "You will want to either burn it all down or pretend it never happened. Both will cost you more than you think." I stared at the condensation sliding down the glass, thinking how water finds the lowest point. "So what do I do?" I asked, finally sounding like the age I am. "First," he said, "you decide what story you're in. Not hers, not his, yours." I took a breath that felt like work. The jukebox clicked. On the wall behind him, a clock said 7:12. The night was young and long. He told me about his almost marriage. Different woman, same wound. Years ago, he'd been a day away from buying a ring when he found messages that read like someone else's vows. He didn't shout either. He left the apartment, sat in his car, and counted breaths until he could steer. "People think betrayal breaks you in half," he said. "It actually multiplies you. One of you wants to go back and fix it with a speech. One wants to never speak again. One wants to make it even. None of them is thinking straight." He looked past me like he was seeing the old scene superimposed on the bar. "I didn't get married after that," he admitted, "which isn't advice. It's consequence." He smiled without joy. "You're not me. Don't inherit my fear. Just learn what it costs to negotiate with reality." He lifted his glass. "To clarity," he said. We drank. The word tasted clean and a little bitter, like medicine. "Here's the part no one tells you," he continued. "Cheating isn't a moment, it's a map. It shows you who respects your boundaries and who redraws them when convenient." He tapped the table. "From now on, guard your energy like a limited budget. Spend it where it earns interest." He asked what I wanted most tonight, truth or peace. "Truth," I said, surprising myself with how quickly it came. "Then stop auditioning for understanding," he said. "She knows what she did. The question is what you'll do." He suggested practicals older adults appreciate. Document everything, sleep elsewhere if needed, call a lawyer before you call her bluff, loop in one trusted friend, not 5. "You don't have to be cruel," he added. "Just clear." He pointed to my pocket. "Funny thing about that flash drive, It saved your meeting, sure. It also saved your time. Years, maybe. I breathed out a small laugh that wasn't happy. He nodded. Now we're getting somewhere. Then he gave me the line I would carry. You decide what defines you, he said. Not this, not her, you. He broke it down like a coach drawing a play on a napkin. Option A, denial. You'll lose yourself. Option B, revenge. You'll lose your sleep. Option C, clarity. You'll lose some comfort and gain your life. He asked me to choose a sentence I could stand on when the room started spinning. I choose not to argue with facts. I choose to protect my peace. I choose to move forward. Say it out loud, he urged. I did, quietly at first, then with enough volume to hear myself. He nodded. Good. Tonight, no debates, no postmortems, logistics only. Tomorrow, call a lawyer. After that, call your counselor. And eat something that grew in the ground. I laughed, real this time. He paid the tab. One more thing, he said at the door. Don't go home for a speech. Go home for your things. Outside, the air had cooled, and the city's noise felt less like pressure and more like proof that life continues. Richard squeezed my shoulder in a way that said, both I'm proud of you, and I've been where you're standing. Text me when you land somewhere safe, he said. I promised I would. In the car, I practiced the sentence we'd chosen. I choose to protect my peace. I set it to the steering wheel until it belonged to my mouth. I wasn't calm, but I was oriented. I drove past my exit on purpose and stopped at a motel 2 towns over with a parking lot full of work trucks. The clerk slid me a key without questions. The room smelled like cleaner and second chances. I put the flash drive on the nightstand like a medal from a hard race and stared at the ceiling until my breathing matched the HVAC. Tomorrow would be logistics. Tonight, a decision. No more speeches. I went home because there were things only I should touch. The porch light came on like it didn't know better. Inside, Jessica was waiting, red-rimmed eyes, hands shaking, voice already reaching for the word that makes messes smaller. It was a mistake, she said, and then said it again, as if repetition could mop. I didn't answer. Not anger, not forgiveness, just the quiet Richard taught me. I grabbed a duffel and moved through my own rooms like a careful stranger. Shirts from the closet, socks from the top drawer, passport, tax folder, the watch my father left me. She cried into her palms and asked for a speech I didn't bring. I set my ring on the dresser without ceremony and took a photo of the meter readings because habits hold when people don't. In the guest room, I pulled the suitcase zipper shut like a seal over a wound. Please, she said through the door. The lock slid. The night held. Morning brings forms. I made coffee too strong and opened my laptop like a toolbox. Richard had texted 2 names. I called the first attorney and heard the voice of someone who has walked people out of burning buildings. We'll keep it simple, she said. No kids, limited assets. We can move fast. She emailed a checklist. Financials, marriage license, titles, a short timeline. I started a folder labeled Clarity and filled it like a man bailing water. Separate bank account. New password manager. Credit freeze. I booked 1 counseling session because grief doesn't respect calendars. I ate an apple to honor Richard's something that grew in the ground rule. Then I drafted 1 message to Jessica. For logistics only, email me. No in-person conversations. I didn't send it yet. The attorney's last line read, "We can file this week." I looked at the ring on the dresser and the ring-shaped shadow it left on the wood. I chose the shadow. Her text started before 9. Long paragraphs, then short bursts. I messed up. It's not what you think. Please don't do this. And my phone stacked them like a deck no one should play. I turned off previews and made a rule for myself. Older adults will recognize. Handle hard things in daylight, not in the dark. At lunch, I opened 1 message and scanned for logistics. None. I closed the thread and created a new contact. Jessica. Logistics. I typed 1 sentence, the one I'd drafted. For logistics only, email me. I added 2 available windows to collect her things, listed an inventory of mine to be left untouched, and included my lawyer's contact. No heat, no bait, no arguments, a memo, not a poem. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't trying to win. Then I hit send and turned my phone face down. Across the room, my duffel waited by the door like a dog that already knows the route. The attorney met me at noon in an office with quiet carpets and serious plants. We went line by line, dates, addresses, numbers that tell a marriage in columns. She explained service, waiting periods, the difference between amicable and messy. I initialed here and signed there. Paper makes a sound when it accepts ink, a soft scrape like closing a drawer. We filed that afternoon. She suggested I stay elsewhere, so I booked 2 weeks at an extended stay near the train with a kitchenette and a table that could hold a binder. I made a binder. Front pocket, case number, attorney info. Tabs. Assets, accounts, receipts. Old school, yes, but order calms the nervous system. I moved a few boxes from the house while she wasn't there and left my keys on a hook labeled keys. The papers were served on Thursday. The email confirmation landed with a simple subject line: proof of service. 3 words. A door I couldn't unclose. Apologies changed shape. A handwritten note on the porch. A voicemail that started steady and cracked. A text that said, I went too far at the gym. It was attention, not love. She asked for one conversation in person, for closure. People who've lived long enough know closure isn't a meeting, it's a practice. I kept my boundary, email for logistics. When she needed to pick up a box of her things, I set it inside the door at 6 p.m., then sat in my idling car at the curb, hands on the wheel like a man learning again. Through the windshield, I watched our porch light make a small circle on the step, the way it always had. She came, took the box, looked up at the window where we used to argue about curtains, and left. No scene. No last words, just a car pulling away and a house that held its breath. I let mine out. The engine eased. The legal part moved faster than my heart. Mediation took one morning. No children, no shared business, 2 cars, 1 modest equity line, clean math. We divided what could be divided, returned what could be returned, and released what had never really belonged to either of us. I handed over a spare garage clicker. She slid my grandmother's casserole dish across the table like a peace offering from a different war. The mediator spoke softly, as if volume might tangle the lines. 30 days later, a judge in a small courtroom said words that sounded both official and strange. Dissolution granted. No gavel, just a stamped decree and a nod. We stood at opposite doors because that felt right. Outside, the sky was ordinary blue. I walked to my car lighter and lonelier than I expected. I texted Richard 1 word: done. He replied with 2, proud. Dinner? I wrote back, soon. Then I drove nowhere fast for a while and let the day settle. Grief doesn't travel in a straight line. It loops around the block and knocks again. Some days were clean: coffee, train, work, gym, sleep. Some days were loud in the quiet parts. An empty hook where my coat used to share space, a song in the drugstore that remembered our first date. I kept appointments with myself, laundry done on Fridays, trash out on Tuesdays, vegetables in the cart on purpose. Therapy helped. So did the ritual of small wins: a clean sink, a paid bill, a walk after dinner without a destination. Friends checked in the way grown-ups do, with food and a willingness to listen to the same story twice. When I woke at 3 a.m., I repeated the sentence Richard had made me practice: I choose to protect my peace. It worked often enough. One night I slept through till the alarm. I lay there, surprised at the quiet inside my chest. Relief isn't loud, it's breathable air. The question tried to rent a room. How long had it been going on? My brain drew calendars, invented Tuesdays, curated evidence from shadows. I almost asked the question that never gets an honest answer because there isn't one that makes it less. Instead, I wrote a rule on a post-it and stuck it to the mirror. Don't audition for pain you don't need. If betrayal is a map, as Richard said, the route I chose didn't loop through guesswork. I blocked the trainer's number I never had, deleted drafts of messages that asked for timelines and receipts, and told myself the only fact that mattered had already happened. My mother used to say, if it starts sneaking, it has already left. I heard her in my own voice and decided to live by that. Curiosity still knocked, of course. I let it knock. I didn't open the door. Some answers are traps disguised as closure. I walked past, forward. Endings make room whether you're ready or not. I found a small apartment with south light and a view of a brick wall I started to like. I bought a couch on purpose, not to replace the old one, but to make a new shape in a new room. I cooked for one and set the table anyway. Richard and I met for a beer some Thursdays and talked about nothing urgent. Baseball, traffic, a new sandwich place near the office. My ring stayed in a drawer I didn't open, which felt accurate. On a Saturday, I hung the porch light I'd brought from the house above my new door, wired right, switch labeled. At dusk, I flipped it on and watched the circle it made on the floor. Small, steady, enough. I texted my folks a photo and wrote, "I'm okay." My mom replied with a heart. My dad wrote, "Proud." I stood there a minute longer and believed them. Then I turned, ready for what's next. Here's what I know now. A $12 flash drive didn't end my marriage. It ended my confusion. Loss looked like wreckage, and then it looked like a door. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I didn't need a timeline, a speech, or a perfect goodbye. I needed a choice, and I made one. Protect my peace, honor my future, let the facts stand without a fight. If you're standing in a living room like mine, breathing air that won't move, hear this. Clarity is mercy. It hurts and it frees. The porch light in my new place is small, steady. I'm not bitter. I'm paying attention. I'm building a life that tells the truth back. If you've ever faced betrayal, share your story in comments. What helped you move? Truth, time, or something else? Type, "I choose clarity" if this spoke to you, and subscribe for more true stories that might change how you see yours.